Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and
I'm
we join
Sam.
you
This
once
is
again.
my fucking show now.
What the hell?
What the fuck was that? Ooh.
You're meant to wait till I introduce you, Sam. This is
We're
not
watching what I want to watch.
right. But okay.
Huff, you heard the lady. This is Sam's time.
Yeah, okay.
What
I
are you
guess so.
talking about?
Okay, Sam, you take it away. What episode of Doctor Who would you like to talk about today?
We're watching Season 5, Episode 11 of Star Trek Voyager, Latent Image. That's the episode of Doctor Who we're watching.
That's a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, remind me which Doctor that is then?
This is the hologram Doctor.
So the Rimmer Doctor.
Sure.
So they brought this Doctor back in Jodie Whittaker's final episode then.
I assume he fits somewhere either before or after the Fugitive Doctor. That makes the most sense.
I don't think I have the energy to keep this bit up for the entire recording.
Yeah,
Happy Fool's Day, everyone. Let's talk about some Star Trek. The reason largely that we're doing this is, and I think you guys have been getting, the audience rather, have been getting sort of snippets of it throughout the recordings from last year. Last year and the start of this one, Sam undertook.
I started around...
Not quite a 5-year mission, but pretty close.
Yeah, I started around June of last year after I'd moved into the new place. And I think just shy of the end of January, I watched every single piece of Star Trek television or movie media.
Did that include the lower decks?
Oh yeah, everything.
Nice.
Quite an impressive feat, obviously, and we're kind of choosing to use this 1-year tradition of talking about, or at least veering slightly off the Doctor Who path around April Fool's to talk about something else. I mean, last year on this podcast, Doctor Who was still discussed, but not by us. So we thought we might as well retroactively apply a little bit more meaning to that endeavor beyond just wanting to do it for fun.
And
we'll talk about a bit of it today.
As we alluded to, the reason I picked this episode for us to watch is that Star Trek Voyager has a character called the Doctor. So watching an episode that focused on him primarily seemed appropriate for this crossing of beams.
So before we get too in-depth into this episode, Fitz, had you seen much Star Trek before sitting down to watch this episode for this discussion today?
No, not a lot of it. So my mum is a huge Trekkie, and she used to watch it a lot when I was a kid, when it was on TV. I've seen clips here and there, mostly, from memes and things like that. But the biggest exposure I think I ever had to Star Trek, actually, there's two bits of exposure to it. One was when a bunch of us went to see Wrath of Khan for my 25th birthday. That was pretty good. Melodramatic and kind of fun. But the other one that I really remember was when I was really young. I think I was like 4 or 5. I saw one episode of TNG, and maybe you can help me out here, Sam. One of the crew members either actually died or almost died, and I can't remember whether it was the psychiatrist or 7 of 9, one of them, because
7 of 9 isn't on TNG. She's in Voyager.
Really?
She's a Voyager character.
Right, because
she's in...
Okay, that's making sense.
She's in Picard, which might be where you're getting your wires crossed, but no, the counselor, Deanna Troi, she never dies. The only main cast member in TNG that died was, at the end of Season 1, Tasha Yar, played by Denise Crosby. She was killed off and stayed dead because she felt like they weren't developing her character enough, so she decided to get out before she became known as the Star Trek actress for her entire life.
Fair enough.
She's the only one who ever died and stayed dead.
Well, the episode that I remember is one where the crew is confronted with basically a giant talking pile of black goo.
Yeah, that's Armus. That's the Tasha Yar episode.
Okay.
Skin of Evil. It's
Right.
called.
And that's the one where this character dies?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm not confusing it with Picard, but I think I'm confusing it with another scene where I don't know whether I don't know if 7 of 9 dies, but there's some scene where there's like almost like a funeral or something for her, and there's like a hologram saying, "Hello, crewmates. I actually really did care about
Tasha.
you."
That's Tasha.
Oh, okay, that's
on
her.
7.
All right. Oh, okay. Don't know where I'm getting that from then.
7 dies in an alternate timeline in the Voyager finale, but that's it.
Okay, fair enough. But yes, that's basically my biggest exposure to Star Trek.
Yeah, as for me, about the same as you, Fitz. I remember about, a little more than 2 years ago, there was an episode of Next Generation playing on free-to-air TV in the tiny TV in the cabin of a just trailer park kind of thing that I was staying in over summer holiday. It was there was heavy focus on data, and I do not remember anything else about it.
It was probably a good episode then.
Maybe, yeah. But apart from that, this is my only real exposure to Star Trek beyond hearing heaps of references to the show given by Will Wheaton when I was watching the tabletop web series from YouTube back in the day. So this is it for me. It's my first full Star Trek episode.
You want to know something fucked up and crazy?
What's that?
Will Wheaton is 2 years older than Alex Jones.
Oh yeah, no, that's hilarious. I found out about that a while ago. That's what right wing brain rot will do to you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
God, that's funny.
So I think that bucking tradition a little bit, Sam. I think you should guide this discussion today.
Yeah.
I think first I wanted to ask, like you went into your Star Trek history just now. I'm interested to know before we get into the discussion proper, like how was this going into it with basically zero context for these characters?
I'm surprised at how much I picked up without needing too much explanation from like this episode alone, especially considering it was like a really heavy character study on one member of this crew specifically.
Yeah.
It took me a little bit to figure out, wait a minute, this doctor fellow he's not human, he's some kind of hologram. They wait a little bit to drop that bomb on you, given that it's not meant to be a bomb.
Yeah, because I was when I watched it as well, obviously. And I was sort of thinking, like, I wondered how difficult is this going to be to figure out certain things.
There are certain things that I essentially already knew in advance, just based on like having some kind of like tertiary attachment to the franchise, based on having friends that watched it and like being on the internet. So I knew that 7 of 9 is like a Borg character, and the Borg are like a hive mind species who were the primary antagonists of Next Gen. Because Star Trek loves to do a thing where if they were antagonistic in a previous show, they're not as much anymore in this one.
No, the Borg are way worse in Voyager. If anything, the Borg are the villains of Voyager more than they are of Next Gen.
Right, but having a Borg character on the ship is...
Yeah, but like 7 is specific. 7 is specifically a Borg they rescued and disconnected.
Got it. Okay.
So her whole arc is more about like learning how to be a normal human again after having spent almost her entire life as a Borg drone.
Yeah, you go, Fitz.
So, given that this is, the first, really, basically the first full episode of Star Trek I've seen, because I, don't remember all of that one that I saw years and years ago, I was pretty impressed. It was good on a first watch, and I actually think it got even better on a second watch. And as Cuff rightly points out, given how thematically heavy this story was, and it was, it was surprisingly accessible. And I don't know whether that's because I've watched fairly thematically heavy stuff in Doctor Who and other forms of sci-fi, I'm not sure, but or maybe there's just something with the writing that helps with accessibility, but I was quick to pick up on how things work. The characters are all really good, they've got a really great dynamic, and it's very easy to pick up the dynamics of the crew. Even if I didn't know that Kate Mulgrew's character was the captain, I know like they obviously refer to her as captain, but even beyond that, it's very easy to pick up that dynamic. She's got that very sort of hardened sort of leader vibe, which is kind of great. And I think with the hologram, I got the idea fairly quickly that this character wasn't, human in a traditional sense, and I thought, oh, is it like an android thing? Is it like a data situation? But then there's like that one bit where he seems to magically disappear and then reappear, and then I thought, oh my god, is this like a Rimmer and Red Dwarf situation? And I was right in the end.
Yeah.
He's even made of like solid light, basically. I don't know exactly what it is. I assume
Actually,
it's.
I think. Yeah, no. There's a picture of Chris Barry and Robert Picardo like posing together because they met at a convention once. And like
that makes sense.
Two holograms walk into a bar.
See, I didn't pick up on the hologram stuff until it was explicitly pointed out. I was just convinced that this was a somewhat accurate autistic character years before autism was properly defined as a thing.
Well, see, here's the thing. Like, almost from the get-go, like, Data has always been, like, very heavily autistic coded.
Yeah.
His whole thing is, like, I want to act more human, I want to know what it's like to feel emotions, all this kind of stuff. And, like, it was written in the late 80s and the 90s. They didn't really know how to do stuff like that, knowing what we know now. But, like, I think for the time, it's generally pretty good. And then it's not good. We'll discuss that later.
Yeah, we'll get that.
But yeah, so like, part of the reason I picked this is because, like I say, it's the Doctor. That's the joke. But also, the Doctor is my favorite character in Star Trek. Like, Data's a very close second, but the Doctor, out of everything, yeah. Wow. The Doctor just edges him out because I think the way because they deal with very similar things. Like, this is not a human, but it is self-aware. It has of humanity, and then there's a bunch of other. There's a episode towards the end of the show where the Doctor has written several holo novels, which are just like stories that you play out in the holodeck, and it turns into a rights issue where because at that point they have two-way communication with Earth again. So he sends those things to a publisher, and then the publisher's like, yeah, we'll do these. We're not going to pay you, though, because you're not a person. So he gets into a legal dispute over his, like, right to, like, own the creative properties that he created, which becomes, like, it's sort of like a retread of Measure of a Man, which is the famous Data courtroom episode from season 2 of TNG. But I think the reason I like the way they handle it with the Doctor more than Data, just that little bit, is Data was always introduced as this is definitely a thing that is supposed to learn to become human. That is the point of it.
Yeah, sure.
And it's less about asking, is Data a human? It's asking, how does Data learn to be more human? How does Data deal with people who don't see him as human? That kind of thing. But with the Doctor, so the Doctor is the emergency medical hologram. He is the lead medical person on the ship because in the very first episode, their actual Doctor dies, and they don't have anyone more qualified to replace him. The most qualified person they have is Tom Paris, who's the helmsman. So he only ever does medical stuff in emergencies where the doctor needs help. So the EMH is only supposed to be for short-term emergencies, but their emergency is not short-term. They're stuck in the Delta Quadrant. It'll take them years to get home. So he's being left on all the time, and the more he's left on, the more he thinks, the more human he becomes. So like this is an entity where its humanity is almost accidental.
Sure, yeah.
And I find that much more interesting than Data. I do find Data interesting, obviously, but yeah.
Do you worry that the Doctor as a concept in this show may be used as a strawman argument by people who think that AI art isn't that big of a deal? So, look, this is an AI, and it made stories all on its own.
I'm actually going to... I want to go into that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing for me is that if actual AI existed, which it doesn't, and it was making art, that would be a completely different story. What we refer to as AI is just...
It's just predictive technology.
Yeah, it's just like algorithmic like generation. It's like like you can teach a parrot to say words or even sentences. You can even teach a parrot to use certain words in certain contexts. You can never have a conversation with a parrot.
Yeah, they're not gonna... Yeah, I think that's a pretty good metaphor. And one of the things that I wrote down in my notes was, the issue is what people call AI. It's not really AI. It's just predictive technology at this point. But if we were ever to get to a point where we had genuine AI, a machine that can genuinely think and feel for itself, and assert a certain amount of autonomy and agency, that's a very serious and kind of interesting question that's going to have to be answered. And thankfully, it's kind of great that this episode has the courage to try and really answer those questions, because it raises the question of, is there actually much of a difference between humans and super advanced machines? I think certainly now there's a massive difference between humans and machines, because again, AI, which is, say, predictive art, is trash. But if we, again, ever had a real sentient thinking thing that just happened to be made with robot parts, those are questions that are going to have to be answered. They'll be very serious ones. Because if the people don't answer them, well, you could wind up in a position where, and I don't know if either of you have seen it, but the HBO series, the adaptation of Westworld, where these beings are basically...
Shame they never did anymore.
Come on now, Sam. You don't like the scene where Jesse Pinkman breaks into that bank and plays Death Grips over a speaker to distract everybody in season whatever it was?
Not especially, no.
Yeah, I've heard
Sam,
mixed things about that show.
That mentality is currently being used to disallow the current RTD era of Doctor Who because people don't like it. You're allowed to not like something, but you can't pretend it doesn't exist. Same goes for the new Star Wars movies. People do that shit as well. People are like, oh, decanonize the sequel trilogy. It's like, no, it happened. You're allowed to not like it, but it happened, and people like it.
Is there an exception if it's incredibly terrible?
No.
Sorry,
no,
I'm being a dickhead.
That's the point. Like, I could easily say the same thing about Chibnall Who, and I don't. It happened. I don't like it. It happened.
Yeah, I'm being a dickhead.
No, like I agree, but also like there is an argument to be made that like you can say, okay, watch up until this point and then stop and pretend that there's nothing else.
Of course, yeah,
for sure. There are definitely shows like that exist. Absolutely.
Getting back on the topic of this episode. I want to ask.
Oh, actually, could I just
say
one thing before it? Yeah, it's okay. The point is, like, in that show, you've got all these semi-sentient android creatures where they start to really gain sentience, but they're treated really badly by the humans because they're just used for entertainment. And some of it is very sick entertainment because
shooting and fucking.
Yeah, to put it bluntly, quite ethically disturbing. So I really actually quite admire that this episode of Star Trek is asking sort of similar questions, especially given that I can't imagine those themes would have been explored too frequently on TV at the time. I don't even think Doctor Who went quite that far in asking those questions when it was still running. So, yeah, good for this episode, basically.
With that in mind, I want to ask you, Sam, is this common practice for Star Trek? And I don't mean just like posing these deep, like philosophical questions about humanity. I mean like focusing on the question significantly more than actually answering it. I'm not saying that to any kind of detriment to the episode. I think that a big strength of this episode is the fact that it is somewhat open-ended by the end, because we never see the Doctor finish like processing what the grief and the concern and the confusion regarding his past. It's more just, oh, he's still working through it, and he's posed these deep questions about who he is and what he's becoming, and maybe we're hinting that he's learning like through a different way than he has in the past. Is this common for Star Trek to do?
I mean, I'd say fairly common. It depends on the episode and the writer and the question being posed most of the time. Like there'll be some episodes where they're like, well, sometimes there's no clear answer. You just kind of have to do what you think is best and hope that it all works out. Sometimes it'll be like, no, this is the wrong thing to do. This is the right thing to do, that kind of thing. Like, it depends what kind of moral question is being asked. And for something like this, where it's a lot more ambiguous, like, I mean, I would say, broadly speaking, the show treats the autonomy of characters like Data and the Doctor and even Seven of Nine to an extent, and like, no, these are people. Of course, there's just sometimes certain ethical things surrounding these people because they're not human people, they're artificial people.
Yeah.
And
they're sentient beings, but they're not technically human. Yeah.
Like there's a line in Measure of a Man where the guy who wants to experiment on Data, which would kill him, Bruce Maddox, is like, if the Enterprise's computer refused a refit, would you do that? And then the person proceeding over the case is like, that's actually a pretty good point. Like, where's the line? The computer isn't smart enough to count as a person. The computer is property. But which side of that line is Data on? Is he property?
Yeah, where does he pass the Turing test, basically?
Yeah, like, is he a citizen of the Federation, or does he belong to Starfleet? Because we found him and we put him in a uniform and sent him off on the Enterprise.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we should probably actually do the episode recap, but if you had something you want to say first.
There are a lot of interesting themes that are sort of swirling around in this story. I understand what both of you say with the ambiguity of it, because when I first watched it, it got to the end, and I knew it wasn't a bad thing, but I just thought, oh, wouldn't it be better if it was a bit clear about what it wanted to say, if it was connecting some of these dots better about who the Doctor is and, you know, what this experience meant to them. But after watching it a second time, it didn't bother me as much, and that was for two reasons. The first was, I could pretty clearly tell that the ambiguity was its strength. It's meant to raise these very important questions and leave the audience to sort of decipher them, but not in like a cowardly, oh, we're not going to touch this idea, that's for the audience to decide. No, but like in an actual provoking way. But the other thing was, once I got to the end, I realized, oh, it's not quite as ambiguous as I thought. There is a bit of it's certainly not closed. This character's journey is far from over, but there's that line, and I'm probably going to butcher it here, but I did write it down. It's where, he says, "So begins a new life," and that whole bit where he's reading the poetry in context with that line and the final scene, that tells me that the Doctor is more in touch with his humanity and his fellow humans than people, including himself, are giving credit for, and that he despite the the relentless current of causality, which again I was surprised they actually brought that up. But despite all that, it's still important for him to try and make a choice. And maybe that's overanalyzing it, but I'm glad that those layers were there, and that, in a way, I'm glad that it took me 2 watches to get there. I think that shows the mark of a well-written piece. So so that was quite good. And the other small thing, this sort of goes to your point, Sam. I was and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand Star Trek is, to an extent, the Federation is almost like a socialist paradise. There's credit, but there's not really much of a focus on private property or industry. There's an emphasis on equality amongst all people and all species. I don't know if misogyny is a massive problem in the Federation, but my interpretation of it is it certainly isn't as bad as it is in our era. So given that, I was surprised that, particularly the captain, the way she treated the Doctor, there was almost like a nasty, almost capitalist vibe, where it's like, well, we're not going to actually outright say it, but he is kind of a object that Starfleet owns, and so we get to turn him off whenever we want, really, because it's for his own good, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was
broadly speaking, like, the Federation is a socialist utopia, universal healthcare. Like there's no money in the Federation. That's the point where things have got to. There is no.
Do they use is it credit that they use, or
it's more like it's more like social credit. Whereas, there is literally no form of currency because of replicators.
Okay.
Everyone's basic needs are met. The population on Earth is significantly lower because so many people are able to just go out onto other planets and make settlements there and just go about everything. So most of the time, it's the thing where you only do the job that you want to do. And
that's cool.
If you really want, you can, in the Federation society, just stay at home all day, do nothing, and contribute nothing to society. That's allowed, but it's generally looked down on because you could be doing something that is to the benefit of society and to the benefit of yourself. You could improve yourself as a person. So it's there's not really like I said, there's no currency, there's no class or social.
There's no wage slavery. There's no.
Yeah, no. The currency in the Federation is more or less your reputation.
Right.
Okay,
that makes sense.
A rich man in the Federation is one who has a bunch of accomplishments that he can point to and say, "I did that."
Would you say that Picard was one of those people, for example?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Most people in Starfleet are I'm making the choice to go do this potentially very dangerous thing purely for the sake of exploration and bettering society and finding to seek out strange new worlds, meet new civilizations, and just hey, we want to learn about your culture. We want to share our culture with you, or just, there's other Deep Space Nine has an underlying theme where it's just well, yes, that is the Federation, but it's not always as squeaky clean as it looks on TNG.
Yeah.
There's no society is perfect.
Yeah,
but
there's still things to work out.
Compared to where we're at now, the Federation is
looks like a fucking paradise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not on Earth, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh god. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting that despite this, almost utopian vibe that the Federation gives off, the fact that Kate Mulgrew's character especially was reverting to this really kind of uncomfortable thing. And look, I don't know if it's worth phrasing it like this, but frankly, the word slavery did come to mind because, like, they're basically deciding this person's fate. They spend the whole, well, not the whole episode, but most of the episode gaslighting him into thinking that none of this happened. They fuck around with his memories. They turn him on and off when they want to. And I just thought, man, that's disturbing. That's really disturbing when you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Janeway is like the joke with Janeway is that Janeway is a giant war criminal who should have been put in prison the second they got back to the Federation.
Yeah, I think you told me that before.
And like she makes a lot of choices that in any other situation would 100% be considered war crimes. But the thing with Voyager in general is, well, this is like in TNG, they're always in Federation territory. They can always just go to they can go to Earth in like a matter of days and be like, hey, Federation, like people in charge of the entire Federation, what's your take on this? Voyager, they don't have that. They are on their own, on Voyager, that's it, that's everything, in a hostile area of completely unexplored space. So there's a bunch of times where Janeway's like, look, I'm going to try my best to uphold Starfleet's morals everywhere we can. Sometimes we're going to have to make deals with the Borg to get a shortcut through their their section of the Delta Quadrant. Sometimes I'm going to have to make decisions about other people in the crew that ignore their autonomy. Sometimes I'm going to have to murder Tuvix because I want Tuvok and Neelix back.
Jesus. Okay. I assume that's like some sort of combined character.
Yeah, there was an episode where Tuvok and Neelix got fused into one guy because the transporter went fucky, and they were like, ooh, this is a new guy, and he keeps saying, please don't murder me, I want to stay being me. And they're like...
That sounds like The Fly in its own way.
I mean, nowhere near as body horror.
No, but like the basic concept of...
Yeah.
Transporter goes fucky, two things become one. That's interesting. But yeah, that all makes sense.
Let's actually recap this episode.
Yeah, sure.
After half an hour.
Yeah. So we start out. The Doctor is in the med bay, and he's got this new holographic camera he's been playing around with. And he's just using it to take medical scans of all the members of the crew. And when he gets to Harry Kim, is the operations officer, he finds evidence that Harry once had a neural surgery that Harry doesn't remember. The Doctor, looking at it, is like, I did this surgery. I don't remember it. And so it becomes, for the first little bit, it becomes this mystery of like, how can I not know about a surgery that I performed supposedly about a year and a half ago?
This is maybe clarification. This is the one sticking point I had that I was like, this is a bit unclear. Does Harry not remember it, or is he, along with the rest of the crew?
Harry, everyone is in on it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay,
it is implied that when he started to lose it, Janeway just put out a PA and said, look, no one can ever talk about Ensign Jatal ever again, or it's going to set him off again. So everyone knows, don't ever bring this person up, because if the Doctor starts to remember it, he's just going to start spiraling again.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, as we eventually learn, the Doctor tries to recover his memories. He gets 7 of 9 to help because she wasn't around when the initial incident happened, so she's not in on it. She's the only one who doesn't know.
That's starting to make more sense, actually.
Yeah.
I do find it a little odd, and maybe it's just because the episode has such a laser-tight focus on the Doctor, but I find it odd that, like, after that first scene, like the pre-title scene and, like, the flashbacks, Harry as a character just completely vanishes from the story. Even though surely this experience would have to have some kind of psychological effect on him as well. That survivor's guilt surely would have been there, and potentially could have been a factor if we had seen it in Janeway eventually making the decision to tell the Doctor about it. Maybe we could have seen a scene where she went to discuss with Harry, look, you've kind of been dealing with this the most in these 18 months. And now the Doctor.
Okay. We get an episode. We get an episode later on where Harry Kim deals with survivor's guilt. Not for this character. Ensign Jatal is never mentioned again, and has never come up before. She exists only in this episode.
Oh dear.
Okay.
He seemed like an interesting character. That's unfortunate.
Doctor Who is episodic as well, but like, I feel like events like this normally have more weight.
Well, that's just what like this kind of television was at the time.
Yeah.
Like you're putting out 26 episode seasons. If someone watched the episode last week and missed this one, and then started the next episode, and everyone started talking about Ensign Jatal and who the Doctor is, like, you'd be like, fuck, now I don't know what's going on because I missed an episode. But like this kind of show, it at least at this time, not so much in later years, but they almost have to write episodes so that they can exist in a vacuum. It's just like, it's an unfortunate reality of how writing and TV production works at the time, but like,
well, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was done.
Well, that's the thing, right? We mentioned how surprisingly accessible this was, given that Cuff and I aren't really fans of Star Trek, but that's kind of the nature of it, right? The way that it's
a double-edged sword. You can watch almost any episode with at least a vague idea of what's going on and be like, okay, fine, I'm completely in, but things won't always carry on from one episode to the next. There are a lot of episodes, not just of Star Trek, of like any of this kind of 45-minute episodic TV show from like the early 2000s to the late 80s, where it's just like, just chuck on an episode and you can probably get by. But there's a good chance that things they talk about here aren't going to come up again unless they're truly, like, status quo changing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so you're telling me that at the start of episode 12 of this season, the Doctor is back to his normal self and hasn't, doesn't, I think that, I don't know about that.
When Picard got turned into a Borg, and they had one episode afterwards where he goes to hang out with his brother for a bit, and he like sort of lets that out, and then the next episode after that, he's fine. He killed millions of people while he was under the control of the Borg. 2 episodes later, he's good.
Can you imagine if they did that?
It's only ever a problem if the Borg are directly related to the plot of an episode.
Oh god, can you imagine
never comes up.
If they did that? Like, if I don't know how the hell this would work, but imagine if the Doctor. Imagine if the Doctor got converted into a Cyberman, and then the next episode they just basically forget it.
I mean, that happened. Matt Smith got converted into a Cyberman, but I don't think he...
Oh, yeah.
Imagine if the Doctor found out they weren't a Time Lord and were instead that was going to be my thing, and then a whole season of comparison. Just like ignored that.
Imagine if there was this weird entity out there that was destroying the entire universe, like planet by planet, like this cloud floating through space, and then it was barely referenced again the next time we saw this character, the Doctor. Like, imagine if that was a thing.
Yeah.
Hey, they had that great conversation between David Tennant and Catherine Tate. What more do you want?
It wasn't specifically Flux related, though.
Didn't he say like he specifically meant Flux in that conversation?
He meant it wasn't the focus of the chat.
Holy shit. No, yeah, like it was much more broadly about the shit he's been through since he last saw Doc.
Yeah, that's true. I'm joking anyway, but yes, it's a good point. It's not as if Doctor Who is immune to that sort of thing.
Maybe it's just because I'm incredibly used to like the way that current TV handles like character arcs and like but like, I don't know. So there's something about the incredibly episodic nature of that just kind of
Well, I will
it's not
say
great.
it is the most noticeable and the most annoying with Voyager because there aren't as many ways they can hand wave it. Because like
Right.
if it's an episode of TNG, you're like, well, who knows how long it's been between these episodes? Who knows how like if the Enterprise gets the absolute shit kicked out of it, and like one of the warp nacelles is just completely blown to fuck, and at the beginning of the next episode they're completely repaired. You're like, well, could have been months in between episodes. They probably just went to a dry dock somewhere and got everything repaired. Voyager doesn't have that luxury because, as I say, they're alone. They have no support network. So like there's a lot of episodes where they're like there's a two-parter where these aliens called the Hirogen take over the ship, drug everyone, make them think that the holodeck is real, and like put them in this World War II Nazi-occupied France fantasy.
Is that where that episode was from? I thought that was a TNG one. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's Voyager. And like they not only is it like they've been doing this for weeks, if not months, when the episode starts, they have like knocked down walls to expand the holodecks as much as they can, because like they're a hunter culture and they're like, we want as many of these hunt scenario things going on as possible. After that two-parter, ship's fixed. We don't have to worry about the fact that they like bulldozed half the interior to make the holodecks extra bigger. It's fixed.
Well, even with Doctor Who, right?
It's the way TV worked at the time.
They do similar things with Doctor Who that they do with TNG because you don't really know how much time is elapsed between episodes. I mean, some of them you do because they literally continue on from the last one, but theoretically, any episode they could have gone off to 100 different planets that we didn't see.
Big Finish audios or comics happened in between these episodes.
Yeah, for sure.
I still feel like a lot of classic Who, especially some stuff that we watch, like they'll at least have a line at the start of a story where they're like it's semi carries on from the previous in some fashion. Like not all the time, but like it happens often enough that I'll note it down and go, okay, so this is referring to this, right, Fitz? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's not strictly relevant to this specific episode discussion. It's just something that I have a feeling is going to annoy me were I to pick up this show as a... Yeah, it's something where if I were to pick up this show, like, in my downtime, watching the rest of it by myself, I would have to figure out a way to get over it pretty quickly.
Sure.
I feel like at least to me, the process of watching it would be what helps you get over it. Because the more you watch it, the more you'd be like, okay, this is what this is.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like I wouldn't recommend starting with Voyager because it's like it's a spin-off of Deep Space Nine, which is itself a spin-off of TNG. If you're going to start that era, you start with TNG.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah. So anyway, back to the recap.
Yeah.
45 minutes in.
See, I told you this episode might run long.
Yeah, true.
So the Doctor's trying to figure out what happened to his memories. So he asks Seven of Nine to help him out. She shows up in medbay, and his memories have been tampered with again. And he's like, "Oh, I don't even remember finding the problem." So then he goes back to Captain Janeway. He's like, I don't know what's going on. There could be some like fuckery happening. I think maybe these aliens that attacked me in some of these like vague memories I was able to recompile based on my hologram camera photos. I was like, I don't know who this woman is. I don't know why she keeps showing up in all my photos, in all my deleted memories, but it's something to do with it. And he like sort of pieces enough together to have this theory that there might be these aliens that attacked Voyager who have the ability to mess with everyone's memories. And Janeway's like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. You just power down for the minute. Tom Paris will take over medical duties for a while. We'll run some diagnostics and get back to you. And so he's like, okay. I'm gonna make a backup of my memories, set my camera to capture anyone trying to fuck around with them, and we'll see what happens. So, predictably, someone fucks with his memories again. He comes back on. His backup memories are restored. He checks the camera. He finds out Janeway's the one that did it. So he goes back to the bridge, j'accuse Janeway, and like realizes, oh, everyone's in on this. What's going on? Why are you all keeping secrets from me? What the fuck's happening? And so Janeway basically sits him down, is like, okay, I can't restore your memories, because if I do, you'll basically go crazy and kneel and like just destroy yourself effectively. He's like, you don't have the right to decide that. I want to see my memories. And so she does some reflecting, and she's like, okay, we'll show you.
And then Seven of Nine confronts her as well.
Yes, because Seven's like, all right, I'm basically a computer person. Would you do the same thing to me? Would you do the same thing to a member of the crew that isn't a hologram? She's like, that's not the same thing. And Seven's like, isn't it? You sure about that?
Janeway compares the Doctor to a replicator, which is not great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like...
Yeah, she said, oh, this thing makes me coffee. It does what it's meant to do.
Yeah. And
oh, that's gross.
Yeah, but like I like that element is there to be like, you have these unconscious biases that you're not willing to address.
I agree. That's great.
I like that element's there specifically because it does get called out. Like if that was the stance of the episode, I would have more problems with it. But the fact that
if they were like, and the Doctor never learned his memories because who cares? He's a machine. Fuck him. Yeah. Like, yeah.
Well, even if they decided to restore the memories, but like Janeway kept that view, I would still have an issue with it.
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't Janeway who told him the truth or something.
Yeah, and the fact that in that scene, 7 of 9 is there to call out the fallacy and especially be like, you just called me human, but that's not quite true either. And I think that specifically was the thing that that snapped her out of it, because I also made note of that as well. When she said you're a human being, I kind of went, I hope that the scene ends addressing that that's not entirely true, and then it did, and I went, oh, thank God, cool.
Yeah. So yeah, she, after being confronted by 7, she goes to the Doctor and says, okay, look, we're going to show you what happened. And he relives a bunch of memories where he's like, okay, there was this person called Ensign Jatal. Everyone seemed to love her. You wouldn't know. It's never showed up in an episode before now. We've gone over that. And then she, Harry, Kim, and the Doctor were on a mission. They were attacked by some hostile aliens, and Jatal and Harry were shot with some kind of alien energy weapon. Get them back to sickbay, and the Doctor and Tom are looking them over and going, okay, basically what happens is this weapon is going to completely destroy their nervous system and kill them, and we only have time to save one of them. In the time it will take us to save one, the other will die. I have to make a choice. Do I save Harry? Do I save Jatal? And he chooses Harry. And then when he goes through that, he's like, hey, look, I'm not going to say that wasn't unfortunate, but I'm supposed to have a level of professional detachment. And they're like, yeah, well, you're supposed to. Didn't play out that way. And then you have, in my opinion, the best scene in the episode, one of the best scenes Robert Picardo has ever done with this character, where he's talking to Mr. Neelix, the chef of the ship, and he's like, how do you make a choice? For me, it's easy. I run all these algorithms, and I'm like, okay.
I calculate the variables.
I calculate the variables. I decide who has the better chance of dying. Who has the better chance of surviving, rather, and then I treat that person. And then the one who was more likely to die, unfortunate, but I let them die. But what if they're equally likely to survive. What parameters do I use to decide then? And then he just starts spiraling out of control. Whereas like why do I make the choices I make? I don't understand. Why did I kill this person?
Yeah.
Why did I kill her? Why did I decide to kill her? And then
he
they have to.
like
that's
he
the
also.
point where they.
Sorry,
no, go ahead.
Pardon me. Like, and he also complains like, "Oh, yeah, I meant to be objective, but I saved someone who I knew personally. What the hell is that? That's not what I'm programmed to do."
Yeah, so like after he's gone through those memories, he's like, "No, you're right. Fuck me. My objectivism was not going on properly because I picked my friend. I'm not supposed to do that. Get rid of my memories. Fuck me." So then they shut him off, and then Janeway and B'Elanna, who's the chief engineer, they have a conversation where like, "Is this our fault? Like, because we have over the course of our journey encouraged him to become more human, to express himself more. We designed code and subroutines to allow him to express himself more. Did we cause this indirectly? And now what is our responsibility to him to help him deal with that?" And they ultimately decide, we're not going to delete your memories. We're going to sit with you until you're able to come to terms with it. And so he's just sitting in the holodeck with Janeway at the time. It's implied there's only like a revolving roster, but he's just going through it. He's just like, I don't know. Maybe I'm supposed to kill her. Maybe like maybe I didn't have a choice. Maybe it was all predetermined. Da 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 da. And as we alluded to before, he never really fully comes to a conclusion. But the thing I like is that he has this moment of like, "Oh, Janeway, you're sick," and it just sort of snaps him out enough to be like, "I'm supposed to be dealing with this kind of stuff. I'm the ship's doctor. I'm supposed to be looking after everyone, not having my hand held as I like come to terms with, admittedly, pretty big things, but like it just sort of like, oh no, I have to keep going with my life while I deal with this," which is in itself a very human thing. And that's kind of the note we leave on.
Yeah. And that line where he says, "So a new life can begin." I mean, that bringing it back to the fact that he's a doctor and that's his, purpose, apparently. That all actually, I think, makes a lot of sense. So that even with that ambiguity, it's still a very powerful moment, which is kind of great. I want to, if I may, just highlight that performance again, Sam, because I think you're very correct in saying, one, it's just a really good performance. Two, that scene where he's having his meltdown is great, and what I love about it is it almost seems like he hasn't processed it at all, right? It almost is like he's back to normal. It's like, yeah, I made the right call. I'm a thing of logic. I made the objective decision.
The thing I like about the start of the scene is you can tell that Neelix is still like upset. Like because he's usually a very high energy, like, and it's really the only scene he's in for the episode, but he's usually a very like high energy, like he runs the mess hall. He's like, "Hey, yeah, come on, everybody!" Like he's the morale officer of the ship. It's his job to like keep everyone's spirits up while they're in this very depressing situation, and like he's like, "Yeah, no, it's yeah, just trying to like get through the day," while the doctor seems pretty normal. And it's only when he's like, choices. That's an interesting topic. And it just goes like he loses control from that point.
Yeah. And but when Picardo starts that scene, it almost feels like he's just gone right back to the way he was at the beginning of the episode. He's got a weird kind of passion about what he's talking about, and I know that we sort of said that he seems to be a bit, I don't know whether this is helpful bringing this in, but you know, he seems kind of autistic coded. There seems to be, I don't know, Sam, maybe you can describe it better than I can, but a sort of fascination with these conundrums. But we think, oh, that's just how he is. There's nothing more disturbing going on here. This is, you know, back to normal. Oh, okay, whatever. But then the cracks start to show, and very quickly but very smoothly, it really escalates, and it's very, very uncomfortable. To the point that when he does really snap, it's very devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bit
to compare it to like Data, for example. If Data had a there's a scene, I don't remember if it's in the Tasha episode or if it's just referencing back to it, but there's a scene with Data and Riker where he's just asking Riker questions about death and how people process it, and Riker's just giving him very like straightforward answers, and like that kind of scene feels more like a like that sort of neurodivergent, I don't quite get these social norms. I'm asking why is this the way that it is? Like the specific question he asks is like, why do people feel sadder when a friend dies as opposed to anyone? Shouldn't a loss of life be just as tragic no matter who it is? And Riker's like, well, maybe it should, but that's just not the way human emotion works. Like, if it was, maybe the like history of Earth would be a lot less bloody if we all felt the loss of anyone as keenly as we feel the loss of a friend. And it's a really good scene, but I think, again, the way that the Doctor and Data are different, and why I like the Doctor more, is because from the get-go, the Doctor has a much more like Data talks like a robot. He does not use contractions. He's like, I do not understand why humans act this way. Whereas the Doctor is like, yes, I'm not human, I'm a hologram, but I understand humans because I have to. I'm programmed to because I'm a physician. Like, I'm supposed to understand all these things. So he, from the get-go, he has a much more human presentation in his personality. But that goes with him actually learning to be more like people as his like mind essentially gets more complex and he learns more about how to interact with everyone.
Sure, no, that makes sense. I think certainly either way, that scene is very powerful. And there was one bit, I don't remember if it was in this same scene specifically or another one, but he says at to Vok, and I like that because I realized
the bridge scene where he's like, Janeway, you fucked with my memories.
When he realizes that
everyone knows.
Yeah. But that moment I really liked because I realized if any other character said that, it would sound, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it would sound really, frankly, kind of cringy and weird and wouldn't make sense, but because of who this character is and the way Picardo portrays him, it feels so authentic. He's clearly an eccentric character.
There's like, the Doctor is he loves singing opera.
Okay, yeah. That explains it.
Like that kind of thing. Like,
he's quite mannered and theatrical in his presentation, but it doesn't feel
he has
inauthentic.
Like, from the get-go, he has a personality. It's more about him, like, sort of growing into it more and like evolving beyond what he is initially designed to, which is just be a Doctor. Like, there was a running thing in the earlier seasons where they were like, well, we can't just call you the Doctor all the time. What do you want your name to be? And there would be a couple of episodes here and there where he would be like, I think I'm going to go with this name. And he'd try it out, and then for whatever reason, he'd be like, actually, no, I don't think I'm going to go with that name. And there was a funny joke in the finale where in an alternate timeline where it took them like 25 years to get back to Earth. They're doing like a reunion dinner, and he's like saying hi to Tom, and he's got his new wife, and he's like, yeah, my name is Joe. And Paris is like, really? 20 years and you picked Joe? Like, that's the name you went with? He's like, yeah, well, it's my wife's grandfather's name. It's sentimental. He's like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever.
Fair enough. But I think for me, it is very difficult to play a kind of very exuberant character without making them a caricature. In a way, the qualities that make Picardo's performance so effective is, for me, what makes a good Doctor from Doctor Who's performance effective, which is that they have to.
I genuinely think if they ever had cast an American, he would do a very good job of it.
I can see it, because you have to have that quality where, yes, they're a bit weird and they're eccentric, but there needs to be such a sincerity there. It can't feel fake. All of my favorite Doctor Who performances have that quality. All of them basically do, minus, an exception, Matt Smith. So, yeah, I think having that quality in this character in this episode is really compelling, especially with the complex themes.
Cuff, any final thoughts from you?
Just that it's an exceptional performance all around from Picardo. It's I don't know. I don't think I can add much onto what's already been said. Like, obviously the scene, it's such a well constructed scene, from like writing and performance and all that stuff. I don't know. I have a feeling that is this the first time that these like specific themes had been brought up with the Doctor? I'm sure there had been some discussions about, there's more humanity coming in, but
it's not the first time it's come up in the show. But
like,
it is considered, like, there had been episodes that were there were episodes that were more along the lines of like, hey, you should consider that you are becoming more human. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any that were specifically like, or much like challenging that, that evolution and what rights he did or didn't have. There might have been, but I feel like
I'm assuming that the angle of like, how much choice do I have? I assume that element is unique to this episode, though. Otherwise,
from memory, this is the first time it comes up. At least this as this much of a focal point. Like, this episode is considered by a lot of fans and Robert Picardo himself to be like one of the biggest turning points for the Doctor as a character.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like,
do you mean Cuff? Sorry. Yeah.
I was just gonna say the groundwork for this level of personality and like self-awareness and agency had definitely been laid down well in advance. But yeah, like this was a big step forward for the character at the time.
Cuff, do you mean like the themes of like free will versus determinism, or do you mean more broadly the existential questions for the Doctor as a character? I mean, either way, it makes sense. But
I think more broadly, it's the determinism stuff doesn't really come up until the end.
That's true.
But like, specifically regarding the whole, which of these two fruits do I pick? That kind of thing, like that as a theme. That as the relation to that, like. The directing certainly implies that this is like an outlier for the Doctor's behavior, and I can certainly see why it was a big enough like concern for the crew that they decided to go down such a drastic route, which I was kind of nervous about when the flashbacks ended for the first time, and I thought they had ended fully, and it had gotten to the point where it was like, okay, so they shut him down because. I know it isn't just because he killed someone. Are they going to now say, oh, you were grief stricken, blah blah blah. But then no, they actually went down a different route with it, and I was like, okay, this makes a lot more sense. I kind of understand, even though
it's specifically that he was unable to reconcile the fact that he made a choice that resulted in someone's death.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is a lot more interesting than just you were sad because someone died.
Yeah, for sure. I had a feeling it was going to be something like that. Actually, I don't know when I picked up on that suspicion, but I think before it was revealed, I thought, oh, something's happened. Like, yeah, he's probably had to make a bad choice, or he's done something supposedly unforgivable. But it was still interesting the way it played out.
The alien that paused it all by just beaming in from out of nowhere and shooting the crew of a random ship. Does that alien design ever appear again?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't remember those specific aliens ever showing up, at least not in a significant way. But again, that's pretty common for Star Trek. There will be aliens that show again.
That doesn't surprise me terribly. I assume that's mainly to convey the vastness of, space, the final frontier and all that. I can understand why that might bother some
which
people,
four-head aliens are we going to see this week?
Yeah, it's like almost like a monster of the week thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that makes sense though, especially given the very episodic nature of the TV show.
I'll tell you something that I felt like I for the most part, the third act of this episode is exceedingly strong. I'll tell you an angle that I don't think lands quite as well, especially not without having seen the previous 4.5 seasons leading up to it. It's the brief exchange where, and I forget exactly how it comes up, where they call it. It's like they use Janeway and the Doctor use the word friend to describe each other. They're like, for a friend, all this stuff. And I'm sorry, but just from this 46 minutes, I don't see it. Like, primarily because, and this is like probably more of like a character choice than anything, but like every single dialogue exchange that happens in this episode where Janeway is involved, when it is initiated, she looks so unhappy with it. Like, every single time someone comes into her quarters or starts up a conversation, especially, like, it happens again in the end scene, she just looks so done and, like she hates every single person on the ship. So, from this episode alone, I do not buy the whole friend.
It's a little bit of, that's the reputation that Janeway has in a lot of ways, because she's, like, stuck in shitty situation, have to make tough decisions. And like that's one of the defining things of her character because of the setting of Voyager. I think you're right. Like in a vacuum, that relationship is not conveyed well enough in this episode. But if you had watched all of Voyager up until this point, I don't think it would be as much of a problem. I think personally, the crew of Voyager feels the most like family to me, largely because they are like, we're all stuck in this shitty situation. We're all forced to like really pull together more than you would necessarily see in like TNG, where they can have staff rotations all the fucking time and people coming and going. Doesn't stop Voyager from having characters that show up in one episode or having inconsistent like I said, Voyager is the one that has the biggest problem with the shift back to the status quo every episode. Like, because it's like, as you like watch the whole thing, you're like, okay, Voyager has 4 shuttlecraft, and over the course of the series, they lose 6 shuttlecraft. Voyager starts out with a crew of around like 170, and by the end of the show, after many crew members have died, they've got something around 200. It's just one of those things where it's just like don't bother counting things on Voyager. Only pain lies down that road.
I mean, I guess they're having that sort of pressure cooker environment because I don't know whether they said it in the episode or I read somewhere, Sam, but they have to travel for 75 years, don't they, to get back to Earth? Isn't it?
Well, initially they'll be like, okay, it's going to take us a long, like, more than most of the people here's lifespan to just get back to the Alpha Quadrant under the ship's own power. So they are constantly looking for, well, what other ways we can take a shortcut. And ultimately, because it is a 7-season show and each season is about a year, it takes them 7 years to get back.
Okay.
But that finale does have a big part where there is an alternate future timeline where it took them, I want to say, more like 20-25 years to get back. And as a result, some things didn't work out. Like Tuvok has a degenerative disease common to Vulcans that if they don't get back soon enough, won't be able to be treated, and he'll basically get the equivalent of like Vulcan Alzheimer's. 7 of 9 dies, a bunch of other people don't make it. And so Janeway of that future makes the decision, I'm going to fuck around with time travel shit. I've done it so many times before. Who gives a shit? Only Kirk has me beat in fucking around with time travel.
What was the other thing I was going to say? Well, what were we talking about before that? Before the pressure? Oh, the continuity thing. So, with that scene where, you know, she says, I'm trying to help a friend, I understand what you mean, Cuff. Yeah, like if you've never watched any other Star Trek episode, it would be challenging, and maybe you wouldn't buy it. But even though I haven't watched any other Star Trek episodes, really, it didn't bother me that much. And I don't know whether it's because the Doctor seems to be a character that I feel like I've come across before in fiction, right? This is the
of course,
little bit weird, kind of underdog, slightly outcast character, but they've got a kind of a heart of gold.
The first couple of seasons, he couldn't leave sickbay.
Really?
Yeah, because like he needs holo emitters to project him, and those only existed in sickbay or the holodeck. And it's not until they do some time travel fuckery and they get some technology from the future, the mobile emitter, which is that little thing he wears on his arm, that lets him travel the rest of the ship. So like there's a bunch of early episodes where he's like, can I be included in the discussion, please? And they're like, we're not going down to sickbay to have this discussion. You can be on a TV and listen in. And if we remember you're on the TV, we'll consult you. And he's like, I don't like that. And like, that's an important early part of his character, I think, where they're like, yeah, whatever, just you're the fucking medical computer program, and it's like it's a two-way thing of like he becomes more human, and everyone else realizes and starts to treat him more human.
Yeah,
which is one.
And that makes sense. But I think like especially his dynamic with Janeway, I got the impression that, this is the thing I've seen before. It's weird, slightly outcast goof, and the sort of rough, seemingly emotionless leader, but I got the feeling that there was that deep respect, and that went so that when she says, you know, looking after a friend, I thought, okay, there's clearly history here. So for me, it didn't bother me that much, but I can certainly understand why it would bother anybody else.
Yeah.
I think it is just because I sort of did pick up the pattern of someone walking in to initiate conversation with Janeway and Janeway wanting absolutely none of it, no matter who it was.
I mean, that happens.
I'm trying to read my poetry, people.
It's just like someone will come to Janeway and be like, "Hey, we got a problem." She's just like, "God, fucking damn it! I have too much to deal with." Like that's her like in this family dynamic. Janeway is the stern and like she's almost like a single mother. She's just like, I've got too much shit to deal with. I love you all, but Jesus fucking Christ.
And you know what's funny
sometimes
is Kate Mulgrew's character in Orange is the New Black, Red, that's her nickname, basically this Russian gangster type who makes all the food in the first couple of seasons in the show. She is a very sort of motherly character, but she can be very cold and distant and mean. But the weird thing is, And certainly, in comparison to this episode, she does get very emotional at certain points. Now, granted, that's partly because one of her favorite people, who's almost like a protege of hers, is a heroin addict and he dies of an overdose a couple of times. But still, there's more emotion there. Yeah.
They die of a heroin overdose.
No, I said nearly die. I said nearly die.
People can die multiple times. They can just get revived.
Anyway,
we have a mutual friend who had like 6 consecutive heart attacks on a plane once. It's possible.
Sorry, what?
I'm not going to name them in this call, but yeah, it happened.
Oh, right, yeah. I thought you were talking about a TV show for a second. I didn't hear you properly. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah. And hey, I've had my fair share of brushes with death. I'm not going to keep going on about that. That's a whole other thing. Anyway. This story's it's pretty good.
It is pretty good, and I honestly don't know how much more input I have to contribute. I guess purely because, like, A, I'm coming at it from the lens of just this episode, but B, because this episode has such a hyperfixation on, like, a character.
Yeah.
I feel like once we've talked about that character, I don't know what else, like, is important to discuss. Like, the themes are all interesting, the acting's great. I guess the flashbacks.
Here's a question for both of you.
Yeah, go on.
Based on this episode, would you consider making the time and starting to watch more Star Trek?
It's
a bit.
Here's the thing. It's gone from not really on my radar to I'd consider it. And I think this is probably a problem of your own making, Sam, but the fact that it took you like 7 months to watch it all kind of puts me off it. Just purely knowing the kind of person that I am with my viewing, and knowing that I would also probably want to do the same thing that you did, and like considering that insane time sink, I'm probably like, I'll give it a bit until like I can justify it, basically.
I guess that's kind of fair.
What was that, Sam?
You are thinking about it though.
I am, yeah. Like it's like I said, like it's gone from being a thing that I could take or leave, to being a thing where it's like if someone were to say if my partner,
if say someone who lived in the room next to you had a hard drive with every single episode of every single Star Trek show and every single Star Trek movie, that might be.
Look, access isn't the hurdle that's nearest. I can find my own damn illegal copies of things I want to watch. You know that.
Who said anything about illegal copies?
It's on a hard drive.
I certainly did. Do you?
So you send me a link to where I can buy the Star Trek hard drive, and then you kind of have a leg to stand on there. But no, it's more like it would be more like if. Say my partner was like, hey, I've been thinking about watching Star Trek. Do you want to watch it with me? I would be more likely to say, yeah, sure, rather than, yeah, I guess. Like, that's about where I'm at.
That's the goal, is...
If you can somehow trick Hannah into wanting to watch Star Trek.
Hannah to watch Star Trek to get to you.
And look, there's a lot of stuff she already wants to watch, so you're gonna have a long journey ahead of you there.
And yeah, fair enough. Look, I'll be honest, I am kind of intrigued. The problem with me is I think it's probably just the ADHD. I'm at a point in my life now where I can commit to stuff. Certainly, if I have to work on a creative piece and I've got a deadline, I'll just force myself to do it. It's what helped me get through uni, basically. But when it comes to just my shifting passions, they shift fairly frequently, and it is very difficult to get through a whole season of a show or a series of books. It's why there are so many books I haven't read. Like and not just like books. I mean like manga or comic books. I'm staring at them right now. The majority of them I haven't even, like, barely started, so
Yeah,
that'd be the issue for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of at that point as well, because I forget how long ago it was, maybe about a year, but I got my dropout account, and I was like, okay, I'm starting to get into D&D more. I'm gonna watch Dimension 20. I'm gonna catch up, because of what I've seen of Dimension 20, I've really enjoyed the clips I've seen. I want to learn more about D&D, and the best way I can do that is to like learn it through hours upon hours of this show that I already know I like. I am now at the point where I'm like 4 episodes away from being caught up, and even though I do love the show, I am struggling to put it on most days, because I'm still kind of like at that ADHD point where I'm like, but there's this other thing that I could do instead.
Yeah, it's
so
a terrible
bit
of a curse.
For the same reason, I'm the opposite.
Great.
Also because of ADHD, I've got the hyperfixation.
You've got the other one.
ADHD.
Oh yeah, no, that makes total sense.
I would say regular person would not finish all of Star Trek in 7 months.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Like, probably about... It would probably be around 2 years ago now. I watched all 15 seasons of Stargate SG-1 and Atlantis in a month. Granted, I had a lot of time off work because I had COVID for a couple of weeks, and then because I injured my foot and couldn't work for a couple of weeks. So I had nothing to do but sit down and just...
Oh, yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Get through episode after episode. But, like, I think it's because this specific format of, like, serialized, episodic, 45-minute sci-fi TV shows from the 90s to the early 2010s is just the perfect genre of comfort show for me.
Yeah,
so I can just blitz through them, like Star Trek, Stargate, X-Files, most sci-fi originals that I know I like all that shit. I can just eat them up. Like,
no, that makes sense.
I had a thing a couple of years ago, but with all of the Marvel Studios adjacent shows that like aren't MCU timeline, like the Daredevil, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Cloak and Dagger, those shows, I went through and blitzed.
I finally got around to watching Daredevil recently, because Born Again has just started, and I was like, it's been so long. That show is fucking great.
Yes, it is. Daredevil rocks.
I remember starting watching it, and I don't know, maybe it's a similar thing. Also, I'm like not the biggest superhero on TV and movie guy. It was pretty good though, from what I saw. I think I watched the first couple of episodes and was like, oh, okay, it
dips in season 2, but everyone already knows that.
Yeah.
And then the stuff that makes it dip gets resolved in a different show and then doesn't come up in season 3. So season 3 fucking rules.
Right.
So season 3 rocks, yeah. I think I had the opposite, but because of that, I think I had the opposite kind of comfort food for you, Sam. Whereas like your thing is all like episodic stuff, whereas my thing is like, give me a really good long arc.
Well, see,
give me that one, because another thing. This is getting even further off topic, but this is getting really further off topic. I recently finished playing the Miles Edgeworth Ace Attorney duology, even though I've owned it for about a year and haven't played it yet. And the first game in that duology is incredibly episodic. Like, each case is incredibly disconnected. Like, there's still some loose threads that tie some stuff together with character arcs, but largely every case is kind of its own beast. But the second game, everything is so interconnected and like weaves in and out of each other, almost like better than I've ever seen any Ace Attorney game do it. Even the ones I really, really liked. And by the end of that, I was just in awe of the storytelling. So that's my preferred style. So I think that's where my...
here's the thing, is Star Trek does have that.
Sure. I don't just...
The problem is...
out that.
They're all bad.
And we'll get to that.
Like the shows that do season-long arcs are primarily Discovery and Picard.
Yeah, Picard was never meant. Never meant. I've heard that it was never really very good, and I assume you agree with that.
Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I've had varying sort of comfort shows and passions. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents would refer to them as my obsession. So maybe it was all my Doctor Who DVDs over a couple of weeks, or there was one summer holiday between year 6 and 7 where I watched every single Lord of the Rings piece of media, certainly that I owned, apart from the Ralph Bakshi movie, over and over again, just the whole thing. And once I got to the end of it, I just started again for like 2 weeks. So it's the trilogy, which was the movies at the time, and the Rankin Bass cartoons. So it was just that for 2 weeks. So yeah, I'm certainly not unfamiliar with that sort of thing. And I've had other situations, like I think I marathoned. I mean, slight mistake of marathoning all of BoJack Horseman in like 10 days. So that was
that's a rough watch.
yeah, that was different. But I think it just varies. I mean, the last big fixation I've had is on true crime, which I got into like last year, and my interest in it has waned off and on a little bit, but it's still the biggest overarching thing, which is why I'm currently writing a play surrounding it. Hopefully, if that ever gets put on anywhere, the audience will come and check that out. But yeah, it's the issue of my mind sort of going into different directions. It's like, yeah, I'm totally going to finish that book on Finnish death metal that I've got. Oh no, wait a minute. I've got a whole Batman omnibus I have to read. Well, I guess I'm doing that today. So.
I can't read books anymore. Like,
I'm sorry if that
I can read. I am literate.
Yeah. But like,
Yeah,
but I understand that the action, because even for me, and it's been true my whole life, and I don't know, it might be the ADHD, but the actual action of reading itself is a problem for me. It's why, certainly when it comes to fiction, I'm always going to go audiobooks. It's just so much easier. I will read non-fiction stuff.
The only form of reading I can do anymore is reading scans of comics on a laptop.
Yeah, sure. But even with me, right, like I will read not a lot of non-fiction books, like stuff on movies and music and things like that. But they have to be about things that I really, really enjoy, and they have to have a lot of pictures. Basically, I have to get that dopamine hit every 20 seconds when I'm reading it. Or maybe not every 20 seconds, but frequently. And it has to sort of just get to that reptile part of my brain, so I'm getting really interesting information, but also interesting pictures or illustrations or whatever. And then with comic books and manga, it's the visual part obviously is taken care of. But yes, I hope that didn't sound too mean. I certainly can understand with either of you the issue of the actual act of reading itself being frustrating, and I definitely felt that when I was doing uni, particularly when I was doing honors and had to force myself to read like between 25 and 50 pages a day on some occasions, and it just it's like slowly getting a hole in the head. Anyway,
well, now that we've
beyond these digressions,
yeah, go on.
Do we want to rank this episode?
I was gonna say, now that we've established firmly that we're all neurodivergent, we should give this episode a score.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with a 9.
I think I'll go with an 8. Actually, a really good episode. But maybe it's because I haven't seen more of the series, so I'm just not feeling as much of an impact. Yeah, I think a solid 8 for me is what I'll go with.
Yeah. This is a 10.
Sure.
I'm not sure if I would say it's my favorite episode of Voyager, but it is my favorite episode about the Doctor, and
sure,
as mentioned, he is my favorite character, so like it's definitely up there.
Yeah, sure. That sounds fair.
Great. Well, happy April Fool's Day, everyone. We will be releasing a little bonus episode in at the same time as this main one. So if you want to hear us, if you want to hear Sam talk about Star Trek more, that episode will be up at the same time. Sam is going to be ranking all of Star Trek.
I sure am.
That's going to be interesting. So yeah, tune in, folks.
Tune in, and it very, very soon, me and Fitz will be back with the regular Doctor Who discussions. We've got a couple of bonus episodes leading up to the new season, which for us is in about 2 weeks.
Fuck, that
Holy
is
shit,
close.
that is soon. Oh man.
Yep.
I've been
Fantastic.
thinking about Andor so much, I forgot.
Yeah. Yeah. So look forward to that. But until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And I'm Sam.
And live long and prosper.
Peace and long life. No one remembers that one, do they?
Nope.
No one remembers the second half of it.